Great. Thank you, Gretchen. Well, welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's Learn from Leaders program, which is sponsored by Dworkin and Bernstein. On behalf of myself, Connie Golden, and my partner in programming, Dr. Gretchen Scope DeSanto, we welcome you to this first installment of Learn from Leaders for the spring semester. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our guest leader today, Valisa Turner Howard, the Vice President of Talent and Legal Affairs at the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. In her role, Valisa provides advice and counsel to the President and the CEO, as well as strategic oversight in talent development, human resources, volunteer engagement, and organizational culture building. Valisa specifically oversees the talented human resources and volunteer experience teams, leading in recruiting and mobilizing top-notch talent, both paid and unpaid, in service to the food bank's mission. She also leads the work to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion are strengths of the organization, as well as overseeing the compliance team and legal affairs like contract review, labor and employment, and board governance issues. Throughout her professional life, Valisa has also been a resourceful community leader who is passionate about increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so with that said, I would like to welcome Valisa and ask her to begin today's interview by expanding on her introduction. Maybe tell us a little bit about her education or history of her career and a glimpse of what brought you to the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Connie. I'm really happy to be here to share, what I can about leadership and working. So I received my bachelor's degree from the University of California, Irvine in criminology, law, and society. I always knew that I wanted to go to law school. At one point, I wanted to be a litigator and potentially a prosecutor, but that changed over time. As you can see, I'm not in a courtroom these days. I then went on to Case Western Reserve University School of Law directly after undergrad, got a law degree, and decided to take the bar. I moved back to California, where I'm from originally. I took the bar. I worked at a law firm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you.
I worked at a law firm. I decided that law firms were not for me, and then took on the great adventure of clerking for a federal judge. So I clerked for a judge, and then I went and got a master's degree while I was working in diversity management, and as well as a certification, because I had always had a love for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and wanted to go from sort of just doing projects here and there to having a foundation and having the language to really do the things that I loved in that space. And so as time went on, I had traditional and non-traditional jobs in the legal arena. I've worked at a law firm as a diversity manager. I've worked at Cleveland State School of Law, where I was in charge of student affairs, externships, and other items. I've also worked at another law firm. I tried it again, but this time, instead of being someone who defended companies, I was on the plaintiff side. So I was helping regular citizens file lawsuits against their employers. And I did that for a little bit back in California, but then decided, nope, still not for me. There's a theme here of, you try it out, no, it's not for you, you find something else. So the job before I came to the food bank was in the Inspector General's office for Cuyahoga County. I started as an assistant inspector general, and by the time I left 7 years later, I was the first assistant deputy inspector general and the chief diversity officer for the Agency of Inspector General. So a lot of people don't no idea what an inspector general's office is. So just so you know, basically we were tasked to detect, deter, and prevent fraud, waste, abuse, misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance, mismanagement, misconduct in county government. So our jurisdiction included county employees, council members, and board members. And so now that brings me to where I am today, which is at the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. And actually, Connie, since I gave you my bio, I've gotten a promotion. So I'm now the Chief People Officer and General Counsel at the food bank. And you gave a nice thumbnail of what that is. But basically providing advice and counsel to the president and CEO, Kristen Warzoka, as well as strategic oversight for the departments you mentioned that I oversee. And the food bank went to a talent model when I came on here, where they put HR and volunteer experience together, because we look at it as paid and unpaid talent. And we could not do the things that we do without that talent. And then because I have a law degree and I have a background in compliance, I also lead legal and compliance. And then I get to use my master's degree in diversity management to lead or facilitate our DEI council. So I call this my unicorn job. It's all the things that I love to do enrolled in one job. And it's been a great place to work.
Well, congratulations on the promotion. That's wonderful, exciting. So we'll go on and considering your role at the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, along with the prior positions you've held, what do you consider to be the leadership best practices that have enabled you to be so successful?
Sure. So there are three things that I sort of look at. One is being a people first leader. So a leader's most important task is to build a team of people around them that are engaged and capable of advancing the organizational mission. And so always thinking about the people that you are leading, because the programs, the widgets you're making, whatever it is that your organization is doing, what the mission is, can only be advanced with people. And so making sure that you help them to perform well. If there are issues, you're trying to solve for those. Leaders have to surround themselves with employees who are capable, engaged, and connected. Individuals who demonstrate that these attributes are top of mind, and it influences their productivity. It helps with low turnover, profitability, customer satisfaction, etc. Second is being transparent and clear around roles and goals. So at the food bank, we are very, very big on strategic planning and goal setting. And it helps us to be a very, I think, efficient and effective nonprofit. And so I carry that down through to my team in terms of being transparent and clear about what is your role in our larger, grander strategic plan, and what are your specific goals to help us reach, where we need to be with our strategic plan. So setting clear and meaningful goals for each of the people on your team, will increase clarity, focus, performance, accountability, etc. And then finally, creating a high trust environment. So I think great leaders invest in creating a trusting work environment where teammates feel safe to take risks, to ask questions, to maybe do something different than they would normally do. And they're confident that no one on their team will embarrass them, will punish them for admitting to a mistake, asking a question, offering a new idea, and establishing sort of that inclusive team environment that invites folks to have an equal voice and different perspectives is not created by accident. You have to be intentional about doing that. And the food bank is one of the places I worked where I think we have the environment where you can ask questions, you can make mistakes, you can take risks, and you'll be supported in doing that. And I try to do the same with my team.
It's great. So, in your role, you lead efforts to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion, that they're strengths of the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. Would you discuss some specific initiatives or programs that you've championed in this regard?
Sure. So when I came to the food bank almost 3 years ago, they had already formed a DEI council. They had already begun really working towards quite a few goals um, to become a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive space. Um, I just came to add, right? And so we did a report where we talked about all the things that had happened in the first couple of years of the DEI strategy, and then we began DEI 2.0, where we created strategic priorities based on global benchmarks, and those priorities sort of come under four different headings. There's foundation, which is about leadership and accountability. And that goal is to build cultural competency of food bank leaders because, DEI cannot become valuable and important in an organization unless the leadership is there to champion it and move it forward. And so we wanted to make sure our leaders are culturally competent and that they are ready to be accountable for building the foundation for our DEI strategy. Alignment, learning and development. So this is increasing the awareness and cultural competency of staff and our partners. So the first level is about leaders. The second level is about our staff and making sure that they are also culturally competent and aware of the differences and dimensions of diversity. And then internal, so that's retention, recruitment, compensation, promotion, identifying, attracting, and retaining a diverse workforce across the organization. And finally, the fourth area that we focus on is external. So the community, philanthropy, and services, increasing access to food bank and wraparound services in collaboration with underrepresented populations disproportionately impacted by poverty and hunger. So this is looking outward. The first three are really more inward. This is looking outward. And so this is not a standalone project or strategy. The diversity strategic priorities are embedded in our larger organizational 3-year strategic plan because I don't believe in, the research will tell you that having a standalone DEI program is not going to be successful. Really, your DEI initiative should run like a ribbon throughout the organization, should be attached to many different things. And so if you look at our 3-year plan, you will see that there is a line that talks about developing and supporting our team, both paid and unpaid, to help them have the most impact possible. And under that, one of the strategies is about increasing DEI awareness and building cultural competence of food bank leaders, staff, and partners. And also talking about the board. So the board does a DEI assessment and they've created an action plan. So all of these things are rolled up into our strategic plan for the organization. And finally, we have nothing if we don't have action and accountability. And so we've created a passport program for staff and leaders where, they go to different trainings, they may read different books, listen to podcasts to increase their cultural competency and awareness. And as they do these things, they'll mark off on their passport that they've done it, what the date was, what they learned, etc. And then at the end of the fiscal year, we have what we call DEI champions. So there's an individual and there's a department. For department, if you got so many of the people in your department to complete the passport, we look at each department and see who had the most people complete it, and then they get a certain prize or a lunch or etc. And same for individuals. And so we're trying to encourage folks to become more culturally competent and aware and give them an avenue, a pathway to do that.
Can I just ask one follow-up before we move on? Can you give us an example of cultural competencies, like what kinds of competencies your leaders and your staff are having to build?
So I'll give specifically at the food bank. Our mission is to make sure everyone has the nutritious food they need every day, right? Um, and so we need to be able to understand who the demographic is that we're serving. It may be somebody who's completely different from you. They have a different upbringing. They have a different way they live life. And you need to be able to competently interact, speak with, help them without letting your biases get in the way, without letting judgment get in the way. Having some awareness that there are people who are different from you, who have different needs, and being able to do the work necessary to help them. So, it's kind of like, gathering the tools that you need to make sure that you can help the folks that need the help without your biases and your judgment and other things that may be internal to you getting in the way. So
Thank you.
I think your cultural competency will help you do that.
Thank you. Okay, so you are very professionally and active in the community. You're professionally active and active in the community. Why is being active in organizations outside of your job important to you? And how do you decide in which organizations you're going to become active and involved?
So I think it's really important to be involved in things other than work, because it actually can be helpful to you at work. If you build your professional development skill set, volunteering, doing something for another organization that may be outside your comfort zone, or you just don't have that skill set at work and you want to try it out. So I'm a member of the Junior League of Cleveland, a sustaining member, and that is a space that trains volunteers. And they specifically sort of push you towards doing something that you don't usually do. So I'm a lawyer, I'm a compliance person. They would say, no, we don't want you to be on the compliance committee. You should be on the fundraising committee, right? You should do something totally different so that you can build a different skill and learn something new. And I think that's a really important piece of being active in the community, is building a different skill, learning something new, doing something outside your comfort zone that you maybe wouldn't do at work, but you'll do it at a different organization where there's lower risk for you. Also expanding your network. I've been in different organizations, whether they were work related or not, where I've met a lot of people in the Northeast Ohio area, and it have expanded my network exponentially in doing so. So, working together with somebody on a committee or in an organization, you build camaraderie. You can sometimes build a friendship. They can see how well you work, what level of work product you put out, etc. And it just expands your network of people who know you and who know your abilities and your skill. I choose organizations to get involved with in two different ways. One is around professional development, right? So I, in the past, have been very involved in different bar associations because I'm a lawyer, in different ethics and compliance associations. And that has been really helpful for my career. But I also, get involved in things because they are passion projects. They are things that I just have an interest in. And so I want to do more. I want to be helpful. For example, the Village of Healing is an organization that I am really passionate about, and it's a medical office for that focuses on Black women and children and families and their specific needs. And so I'm really interested in that area. I told you about the Junior League. I'm very interested in providing service and volunteering, so I joined the Junior League. There's just different organizations that are tied to my passion and others that are tied to professional development.
Well, thank you for that. We are big proponents of building your network, so we love to hear that message from our speakers and reinforce what we deliver. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Given your involvement in diverse organizations and your leadership role within those organizations, what advice do you have for effectively balancing a variety of responsibilities and commitments?
Yeah. So I'll give a preview to an answer to a question that later. I don't necessarily believe in balancing. I think it's more about integrating, right? So finding organizations that integrate into your professional life, like if you're in fundraising, joining the Association of Fundraising Professionals, so that when you go to a luncheon, when you go to a continuing education seminar, you're not only involved in that organization for yourself, but you are also representing your organization, and you are creating relationships and potentially networking and meeting people who could benefit your organization. And so your organization would probably be more willing to allow you to do those things during the workday. So that's integrating it into your work that you're already doing. If it's an organization that is not related to your work, it's a passion that you have. I find that I don't have trouble integrating that into my life. I don't feel like I have to balance it. It's something that I really want to do, and so um, I don't have a hard time finding time to do it. Now, I think you have to be very careful about how many organizations you join, about what role you take in each organization, because you can be a financial paid member of an organization and that is your contribution. You make sure that this nonprofit has, you know, the funding they need to move forward. Or you could be on the board and you could be the corresponding secretary, you could be the president, and you're really putting more oars in the fire. So you have to think about how many you're joining, what is your goal, why did you join, and then what do you want your impact to be while you're on the board or while you're in the organization. Those are things you should ask yourself before you join any organization or take on a leadership role.
It's great, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about the role that mentors or role models have played in your career?
Sure. So I have had a lot of mentors and role models. My first role model and mentor was my mother. Um, and that's for a lot of people, that's probably right. She was a JAG attorney in the Navy. And one of the reasons why I said, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to be a litigator. I didn't turn out to be a litigator, but I did go to law school. So she was my first mentor and role model. And over time, I have gathered, excuse me, I've gathered other folks who have mentored and been my role model. I want to just give a plug for mentorship versus sponsorship. A lot of folks talk about mentors, but sponsors are right up there. That's how I have gone as far as I've gone is when mentorship turned into sponsorship. So mentorship and sponsorship are both professional relationships where each person has a clearly defined role and has committed to being present and performing that role. So in mentorship, it's a relationship between someone sharing knowledge and providing guidance. And mentorships can start with something as simple as an informational coffee or a phone call, etc. Right? It could be a one-time meeting, or you could have a relationship that evolves. Sponsorship, on the other side, is what I would call like phase two of mentorship. Once the mentor and mentee have worked together for a while, the mentor may see evidence of growth, of self accountability in the mentee, and at that point say, okay, I'm going to start actually advocating for that mentee. And the sponsor is doing more than sharing experience and knowledge at that point. The sponsor has come to feel personally invested in the advancement of the mentee. And they expand their visibility within their organization if they're internal or external, model self advancing behavior, and they directly are involved in getting their mentee experiences that provide opportunities for career advancement. So what I like to say is that sponsors say your name in a room full of opportunities, right? Um, And so I've had mentors. I have mentors that have turned into sponsors. I've had people who were just sponsors. They saw whatever work I was doing in the community or with the organization, and they said, you have the skills that are needed for X. I'm going to say your name in this room. And that has happened to me over and over and over again, mostly because I built a reputation of being someone who can be mentored, who can be sponsored, who takes direction and guidance, who is able to deliver once someone provides guidance or someone puts my name forward. So that's kind of been my experience around mentors and role models. And then it sort of culminates with what I call the board of director concept. So when I was in college, someone said to me that you should be building your board of directors, your personal board of directors. And I was like, what does that mean? I don't understand what you're talking about. And she talked about how many nonprofits, they have a board of directors that provides guidance and tells you this is what you should be doing, or this is how your organization should move forward. And she said everybody should have their own personal board of directors, someone different who meets a different need, plays a different role in your professional life that you can call, that you can email, that you can ask them for advice at any time. And from then on, I began to build that board. And I've done that through college, law school, my master's degree, and the jobs that I've had. Even now, I'm still building that board. I am still finding mentors and sponsors to add to my board of directors who I can call upon when I need guidance or advice, etc. Even at this point in my career, I can still use that. Finally, seeing what you can be is key. This is the role model piece. When I was in law school and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, because at this point I did not want to be a litigator, I was making cold calls. I would find people online who had the job that I thought I wanted. I would look at what their skill set was, what degree they had, where did they work, etc. And then at one point I started calling people and I'd say, can I do an informational interview with you? I'm trying to learn more about what you do. Would you mind? If they were in a different state, I do a call. If they were local, I would say, can I shadow you for a day just to see what you do? And no one ever said no to me. Most people were very flattered. They were like, oh, I didn't know anyone was paying attention to what I'm doing. So I say that to say, peruse LinkedIn. Don't be afraid to call people or send them emails and say, I'd love to do an informational interview with you. Don't be afraid to ask people to shadow them. I think this is how you create a mentoring relationship in some ways. This is how you learn more about what people you think are your role model, what are they actually doing. I think it's key to knowing what you want to do and how you want to do it, seeing what you can be. Look around and see what other people are doing and see, is that something you want to do? Investigate it.
That's great advice and a good approach. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
It kind of leads me into my next question, which is about communication skills, because we talk about that a lot. We have a lot of business communication students with us today. And if you could elaborate a little bit on what communications skills you feel are important for success, and then what suggestions you have for building those skills.
Okay. So communication skills are abilities you use when giving and receiving different kinds of information, right? These skills may be a regular part of your day-to-day work life. Communicating is a clear, effective, and efficient way. It is extremely critical and a useful skill. It involves listening, speaking, observing, empathizing. It's also helpful to understand the differences in how to communicate through face-to-face interaction, phone conversations, digital communications, like email and social media. So there's a couple of important skills that I would highlight. The first is active listening. So, which is also called appreciative listening or mindful listening. And it means paying close attention to who you're communicating with by engaging with them, asking questions, rephrasing. And you can improve your active listening skills by paying attention to other people's facial expressions, body language, tone of voice. Instead of preparing what you plan to say next, focus on what the other person is saying now and how they're speaking. Ask follow-up questions. So I think active listening is a key skill, and some people may not even see it as communication because you're not talking or you're not writing, but I think it's a key skill that will help you when communicating with others. The other one is using the right way to communicate. This is an important skill. Communicating is better when you consider your audience, what information you want to share, and the best way to share it. So I always talk about when I was an associate at a law firm, there were partners who only wanted you to call them on the phone. They didn't like email. They didn't want you to text message them. They didn't want you to show up at their office. They wanted you to call them on the phone. And you would get a better response if you communicated with them in the way they preferred. And that lesson stuck with me. And now, especially people that I don't know well, I always ask, how would you prefer that I communicate with you? So if you want to get the best response, you should ask them how they would prefer to be communicated with. So looking at the right way to communicate. The other piece is effective feedback. So for me as a leader with a team, I always want to be reaching for effective feedback. So that may be sharing specific examples of an issue, the consequences of the issue, asking questions to formulate solutions to the issues. And strong communicators can accept constructive feedback and they can provide constructive input to others. Providing and accepting feedback is an essential workplace skill, as it can help both you and the people around you make meaningful improvements to their work and their professional development. A good way to learn how to give feedback is to take notes from others when they're offering you feedback, right? When you come across a well-explained piece of feedback, take some time to observe and analyze why it was good, why it resonated with you, how you might apply those skills. And on the flip side, when you get feedback that made you feel awful, you didn't like it, you didn't get anything out of it, take notes on that as well. And you'll learn how you want to provide effective feedback when you have a team or to a coworker or to your direct report. And then finally is responsiveness. Whether you're returning a phone call or sending a reply to an email, employers often view fast communicators as more effective than those who are slow to respond. At the food bank, I think we have a 48-hour rule. If you get an email, you need to have responded within 48 hours. And that's internally and externally. One method to consider is to consider how long your response takes. So when you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I work on this? Is this a request or a question you can answer in the next 5 minutes? If so, it may be a good idea to address it as soon as you see it. I tend to take that route. If I get something in my email or someone texts me and it's something I can answer right then, I just do it because I don't want to forget. I don't want to have to circle back and remember, did I do this, did I not? So I do it right then and there. If it's a more complex request or question, you can still acknowledge that you received the message and then let the other person know you're going to respond in full later. And that's another strategy that I use. I'll, say I saw your email, I'll respond, when I have an answer, and then I use Outlook, so then I'll put a flag, and that flag will help me to come back to it. So responsiveness is another communication tool that I think is helpful.
Those are all great tips. Thank you. I've got two more questions I want to ask, and then I'm going to turn this over to Gretchen because I know that our audience also has questions. But one of the things that we touched on was networking and the importance of building your network. And I was wondering if you had some suggestions that you would offer our students for building their networks, because that can be intimidating.
So sort of connecting back to what I talked about, I think in this day, using LinkedIn to build your network is really helpful, but you have to use it the right way, right? So you should not send messages just cold to people. The message should say, this is who I am, this is where I go to school, this is why I'm calling you. And if you know someone that knows the person, it would be even better if you could get a warm handoff. Ask the person that you know that also knows them, can you introduce me to XYZ? This is why I want to be introduced. I'd love to do an informational interview, etc. Um, so that it'll feel better for the person you're trying to network with. When I was in law school, we had everyone had a business card. People still have business cards, but a lot more people had electronic business cards. So I used to keep mine in a book. I had all the business cards, and I would write on the back where I met them, what we talked about, send a thank you note, etc. You can still do the same concept with electronic business card keepers. And I use Blink, BLINQ, which is a app on my phone. Excuse me, and it's very helpful because it goes straight into my contacts on my phone, and I can write the same notes, and it's on my phone. And if I lose the card, I lose the card, or you don't have to worry about that. So I would say, LinkedIn is a good tool, but be very careful about how you use it. You should not use it as though they can't see you, that they can't find you. Cleveland and Northeast Ohio in general is a very small place. So you should always act as though you are standing right in front of them when you are interacting with someone on LinkedIn. And be clear about what your ask is, why you're contacting them, and what you're trying to do when you send direct messages or you try to get connected. And then in terms of at in-person things, go to events that have to do with your area of interest. If you want to go into accounting, find the Accounting Association and join their young professionals group and start going to their happy hours. And that's how you'll start to build a network. If you want to be a lawyer, join the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association, join the Norman S. Minor Bar Association, join any bar association in Northeast Ohio where you could meet other lawyers, even if you're not in law school yet, where you could meet law students and you can start to begin a network and meet people. That is the key, is go where the people are that you want to network with. And be prepared and professional when you go. Have your contact information, whether you have an actual card or you have your electronic card. Be prepared with appropriate questions. If you're going to an event, I've heard of people, I have not done this, but I've heard of people doing this before. If you are able to get the list of who's going to be there, you could do research beforehand and figure out, I want to talk to this person, this person, this person, because they're doing, they're making widgets in Belize, and that's what I want to do. And go in prepared. There's nothing wrong with being prepared when you go into network. Nothing has to be off the cuff. Nothing has to be off the top of your head. You can be prepared when you network. I know some people think it's weird, but I think it's better that way, to be prepared and know what it is that you want and who you need to speak to.
That's great. And thank you for the Blink resource. I'm going to check that out. I was not aware. So thank you for that.
And it's free. Blink is free.
Yep. Free is good. We like free. I'm going to turn this over. I've got one more question I want to ask, but we need your questions. So make sure that you are putting them in the chat or raising your hand, and Professor Skok-Desano will take care of you. But I do have one last question, and that would be, what advice would you give our students or future graduates that you wish someone had shared with you when you were about to graduate with your first degree?
So this is pretty short and simple, and it is, you do not have to do what everyone else is doing. If everyone else is going to a Big 10 accounting firm and that's not for you, you do not have to go into that traditional space. You can chart your own course. That's what I ended up doing. I did not have a traditional route to this job. I charted my own course and decided what I wanted to do. I told you, this is my unicorn job. This is not a legal job that just drops out of the sky. And so do not feel like you have to be cornered into one place or another. because you have a certain degree. If you know what you want to do, and again, here I go back to seeing what you want to be is key. Look through LinkedIn, find someone who's doing what you want to do, and chart your own course.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Gretchen, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Okay, we're starting off with a great question from Tiffany. What qualities do you see lacking amongst today's leaders? And does that lack basically cause conflicts within your work? And if so, how do you handle those?
I think today's leaders lack, what is the word? I think a lot of things are so like we're on this virtual call, right? I think during the pandemic, something happened, and people became less connected and less plugged in, less empathetic. And we need more of that. To be a good leader, you have to sort of be empathetic. You have to understand what your team is going through and not just be focused on making widgets or, making your sales quota, or because as I said before, people first. People are how we get things done. And so if the people are broken, you're not going to make any of your numbers. You're not going to make any of your goals. You have to be concerned about people.
Thank you. So I'll remind everybody, if you have a question, you can type that into the chat box. You can send it to everybody, or you can just send it to me. You can also raise your hand next to your name in the participant list. There is a raise hand button that should also appear at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to take that approach, you can do that, and I'll call you by name and you can unmute and ask your question. So let's see, we got another question here. What challenges did you encounter during your work and how did you overcome them?
Challenges. I would say over the years, having sort of been in different areas, traditional and non-traditional of the law, one of the challenges has been the reality not meeting the perception. I thought this job was going to be X, but it's really Y. And how do you reconcile that? Because, do you just stay and continue on because it's a good job and it doesn't matter that, it's not what you thought it was going to be? Or do you change tracks and go a different way and figure out something else to do that's more in line with what you thought it was going to be? And one way that you, as a student, can try to head some of that off is as often as you can, do an internship, do an externship, do a shadow day with people who have jobs that you think you want, and really do a deep dive into what is it that they're doing and figure out before you graduate, is this what you want? Is this the job or the career that you want? So that there's no misalignment when you get to that job.
That's great advice. And for everybody on the call, please note that Lakeland's Career Services could help connect you to folks out in the community that would welcome the opportunity to have you spend a day with them. And of course, Connie and I, we know we have a big network too. So if you want to talk to us directly too, we're certainly, we'd like to help you in that regard. So let's see if there is another question or any hands raised. I'm not seeing anything right now, so I'm going to ask a question just because I'm curious. And I think this happened before you came to the Cleveland Food Bank, but I know Mackenzie Scott, and if you all don't know her, she's the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos. She got a lot of money in that divorce, and she gave a substantial sum to the Cleveland Food Bank back in 2020. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, that had to have been a great buzz. It had to have been an incredible help to your organization. I just like a little snippet.
So you're right. I was not here. I started here in 2021, in 2020, no, 2022. Yeah, I started in 2022. However, what I understand is that the bulk of it was put into an endowment so that we could, save money and use some of it as it came available. Some of it was used to help us build our new building, renovate our old building. And we use some of it for an internship program. We just started this internship program 2 years ago. When I got here, I created the program. The application is actually open right now. It closes in March. We have eight different spots, and you work with different departments. It's 11 weeks. It is paid $19.61 an hour. Exactly. Because we believe in trying to pay people a living, at least hopefully a living wage.
Great.
And so, one of the things we wanted to do is create a pipeline of leaders into the food bank. And so we created the internship program. We also subsidize employees who are getting a better or a different degree that would help the food bank. We subsidize some of their costs. So we've done a lot of different things, but the bulk of it is, I believe it's in an endowment.
Okay, that's good. Well, thank you. Thanks for giving me the inside story.
Sure.
So we've got another question here. You mentioned setting clear goals and having people who are engaged and capable.
Yeah.
How do you help foster that with volunteer groups?
Oh, that's a good question. So volunteers are just that. They are volunteers. They do not have to do anything. They, of their own free will, come to the food bank and give their time, their talent, or their treasure. And so we try to foster, having them come and work with the food bank by making sure that they know they are appreciated, that we could not do any of this work without volunteers. Literally, we do not have enough employees to do it without volunteers. And that, basically in terms of making sure they understand their role and the goals, we are very clear about what their goals are for their project. We are clear about what their role is. There's when they come in, there's an orientation. We also have a lot of regulars who they know their job better than we do. So we are thankful for volunteers and what they do for the food bank, and we make sure they know that as much as possible so that they will continue to come back. And we try to be as clear as possible about what their role is and what our goals are as a food bank. We have a public document that talks about our strategic plan and goals, et cetera.
So there is a follow-up question, and I'm not sure if you want to add anything based on what you just said, but the follow-up is, with volunteers, you get a little bit of everything, and sometimes it's hard to know who's really engaged and capable.
Yeah.
Any advice, for working with that population beyond what you've already stated with regards to, making sure they know the roles and the goals and appreciating them?
Yeah. Yes. It can be a difficult population. And in fact, the research shows that volunteers are aging, and that we need to sort of re-up the pipeline. And again, during the pandemic, something happened here for us. Almost overnight, we had no volunteers because the most vulnerable populations were elderly and children, and that's most of our volunteers. So we eventually had to get the National Guard to come and help ensure that we could still do the work we needed to do to get food out. And so now we're rebuilding our volunteer ranks because they're not where they were before. We had over 20,000 volunteers a year. We're now at, last I looked, I think we had between 10 and 15. So we're making our way back, but it's difficult, and you have to have an intentional strategic plan to recruit and retain volunteers. And so we've done that here as part of our larger strategic plan. The volunteer experience team has created a retention and recruitment plan in the hopes that we'll be able to bring more people into the pipeline and keep who we have. So I guess the answer is being intentional and planning.
Great.
So Gretchen, I don't see any other questions, so I'm good. Well, yep, there's still time, so get your questions in. But I do have another question, and I thought I'd throw that out there while people ask their questions. You mentioned earlier about you choose your community activities where you volunteer through integrating with your job.
Yeah.
You're a busy lady. You have a lot of responsibilities at the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. You have a lot of community activities. Do you have suggestions for work-life balance?
Okay, so um, I'll say it again. I don't necessarily believe, I think work-life balance is a myth. It's very difficult to balance all of these things. And so I think integration is the better word, especially after the COVID pandemic. It's been almost impossible for people to balance things. Instead, I suggest focusing on work-life integration. So, and that means looking for employers that provide certain benefits and perks that will help you to do that. For example, the food bank has a flexible work arrangement policy. They've had it before COVID, but it wasn't really, most people didn't take advantage of it as they do now. But basically, it's, you know, when can I work remotely? When can I flex my time, start late, or leave early, start early? You know, the refrigerator repairman is coming, excuse me, you know, in that weird range between 12 and 5. I need to work from home. Is that okay? And having, you know, a leader who is able to give you that latitude is always helpful. Workplaces, not mine, unfortunately, have on-site services, right? They have on-site childcare, laundry, uh, dry cleaning to relieve some of the outside work burden for employees. Getting that stuff done while you're at work instead of racing out the door at 5 o'clock to try to go pick up your dry cleaning, right? Um, Team building on company time. So sometimes, you know, people want to do team building, you know, after work or on the weekend. And a lot of employees are like, that's my time. You know, I don't want to be doing work stuff on my time, or I cannot. I got to pick up my son at 5 o'clock, so I can't do happy hour. At the food bank, we are getting better at that and becoming clearer about making sure team building and celebrations are during company time as opposed to outside of that for those reasons to accommodate staff who have they just can't do it. And then giving email a bedtime. This is a big one because during the pandemic, you know, people rolled out of bed and like started working at 6 a.m. because they could. I don't have to get dressed. I don't have to, you know, go downtown. I don't have, and then they would not stop working until they got back in the bed. And it became a real problem. It was too much integration, right? So, you know, just giving email bedtime. And this means that leaders will also have to adjust their expectations about sending and receiving emails after a certain hour. My CEO actually has at the bottom of her emails, you know, I don't expect you to respond, you know, at XYZ time, which I think is great. And that sends a signal to others that just because I sent you an email doesn't mean you need to immediately respond. So those are a couple things that I think help with work-life integration, either through your employer or for you setting your own boundaries.
Thank you. We've got another great question. This is, you mentioned joining organizations that align with future goals that you may have. Doing that can conjure feelings of imposter syndrome. So any advice on pushing through that?
Um, by imposter syndrome, I guess you're talking about, you know, you show up at the bar association event and you're like, I'm not a lawyer. What am I doing here? Or
I
you
think
are
so,
a
feeling
lawyer.
like you don't fit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you don't fit. So
Yeah.
what I would say is, I guess I've always been of the mind, you know, what's the worst that will happen? What's the worst someone can say? You paid your money, you're coming to the event, you tell people exactly who you are. I'm a student at Lakeland College. I want to go to law school. I want to be a lawyer. I thought that it would be wonderful to come to this legal event and meet different people who are doing XYZ. I would say who you are, say what you're doing, be upfront, be transparent. And then it doesn't feel like you shouldn't be here. You should be here. You should be taking advantage of the information and the networking that can happen there. And most people, I will tell you again, when I would just randomly call people and say, can I talk to you? No one said no. People in general want to be helpful and they feel flattered that you've, found them and you want to learn from them. And so I get imposter syndrome. I understand. I've had it in the past as well, and I would just do it anyway. That's a whole other story, but I'm a big proponent of, in many things, do it anyway. If you're scared, if you're like, I don't know about this, do it anyway. Because at the end of the day, the worst that could happen is someone is like, oh, you're not a lawyer, and you'd be like, you're correct. I'm not a lawyer. I'm here to learn.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I've got a question. I know in part of your job is organizational culture building. So I know in my career and when I certainly talk to students about thinking about their careers, it's important that it be a right job fit, obviously, that they have the skills that, the organization is looking for and they want to do that type of work, but also that organizational fit or that culture fit is really important. So that you're in a place that has an alignment of values, et cetera, as to what's important to you. So do you have any advice for those who are on the line as to how do you make sure you find a good match there? Because I know it sounds like you've moved to a number of different positions. How did you make sure that this was a good place that you wanted to invest your time?
So I think, I always say this to other people, that you are interviewing the company just as they are interviewing you. When you're like, oh, I got an interview, I'm going and there's a panel, you also get to interview them. It's not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. So come prepared with the questions you have. Ask the questions you really need to know. And I think in every panel interview I've been in, probably over the last year, every candidate has asked, can you tell me about the culture of the food bank? Can you tell me why you wanted to work here? Why you still work here? Those are good questions to ask folks about why they came there and why they still work there. I think it gives you some insight into, the type of place that it is and what they like about it, because it may be what you would like about it as well. So I would say come prepared, ask your own questions, and then do your investigation, right? Look on LinkedIn, look on Glassdoor, salary.com, where they have comments from different people who've worked here. Like, just do your own investigation, and whatever your particular things are that you're looking for a culture in a organization, be on the lookout for those things in comments or in other places about that organization.
Thank you very much. So I think we got 1 minute left. Velisa has put in her contact information into the chat box. So if you want to capture that along with her LinkedIn profile. So thank you for inviting folks to connect with you that are on the line today. I'm going to be reaching out to you to get that information on that internship program.
Yes.
Because if it's all right, I'd like to share that with everybody who's joined us today. They may be interested.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you again for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing all of you on campus.
Thank you, Velisa. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Really
Velisa.
appreciate your expertise and sharing it and your time.